Welcome to Premium English Hub, where fluency becomes confidence. Let's master English together. In today's lesson, we will talk about a very common problem that many English learners face. Many people understand English very well, but when they try to speak, their mind suddenly becomes blank. The words disappear, and the mouth becomes slow. This situation surprises many learners. You may watch English videos and understand most of the message. You may read articles and recognize many words. You may even understand conversations between native speakers. But when someone asks you a simple question in English, you suddenly freeze. You know the words, but the sentence does not come out. This moment feels uncomfortable. Your brain begins to search for words. You try to translate from your native language. You start thinking about grammar rules. While your brain is trying to organize everything, time passes. The other person is waiting for your answer, and you feel pressure. Because of this experience, many learners think something is wrong with them. Some believe their vocabulary is too small. Others think their grammar is weak. Many people return to studying again and again. They read more lessons, watch more videos, and learn more rules. But the speaking problem still remains. The truth is very simple. Understanding English and speaking English are two different skills. Many learners train their brain to understand English, but they do not train their brain to produce English quickly. Because of this, the brain becomes slow when it is time to speak. In this lesson, we will explore why this problem happens and what habit can solve it. Once you understand this missing habit, speaking English will become much easier and more natural. Before we solve the speaking problem, we need to understand something very important. Understanding English and speaking English are two different skills. Many learners think these skills grow together, but they actually develop in different ways. When you listen to English, your brain recognizes sounds and words. When you read English, your brain recognizes vocabulary and meaning. These activities are called input skills. Your brain receives information and understands it. Speaking works in the opposite direction. When you speak, your brain must create sentences. It must choose the right words. It must organize grammar. It must control pronunciation. All of this happens in only a few seconds. This is why speaking feels difficult for many learners. Their brain is trained to receive English, but it is not trained to produce English. The brain understands the language, but it is not used to creating sentences quickly. Imagine learning to drive a car. Watching driving videos can help you understand the rules. Reading a driving book can teach you how the car works. But these activities are not the same as driving the car yourself. To become comfortable, you must sit in the driver's seat and practice. Language works in a similar way. Listening and reading build understanding, but speaking requires action. Your brain must practice producing language again and again. Many learners spend years improving their listening and reading skills. They watch English content every day. They read articles, subtitles, and social media posts. This helps their understanding grow stronger. However, if they rarely speak English, their speaking skills stays weak. Because of this imbalance, learners often reach a strange level. They understand a lot of English, but they cannot express their thoughts easily. Their brain knows the language, but it does not know how to use it quickly in real conversations. This is the key idea to remember. Understanding English is only half of the journey. Speaking English requires a different type of training. Once you understand this difference, the solution becomes much clearer. Now let us understand what really happens inside the brain when you try to speak English. When someone asks you a question in English, your brain must respond very quickly. It needs to build a sentence in only a few seconds. For many learners, the brain starts doing too many tasks at the same time. First, the brain searches for the correct English words. At the same moment, it also checks grammar rules. Then it begins translating ideas from the native language into English. While this process is happening, the brain also thinks about pronunciation. It tries to remember how the word should sound. Because so many things are happening together, the brain becomes overloaded. This overload creates the feeling that many learners describe as freezing. The mind suddenly becomes slow. Words feel far away. Even simple sentences feel difficult to say. This situation does not mean the learner does not know English. In many cases, the learner actually understands the language quite well. The problem is not knowledge. The problem is speed of production. Think about a musician who's learning to play the piano. At the beginning, the student must think about every note. They must look at their fingers. They must remember the rhythm. Because of this, the music sounds slow and uncertain. But after many hours of practice, something changes. The musician no longer thinks about every note. The fingers begin to move naturally. The music becomes smooth. Speaking English works in the same way. At the beginning, the brain thinks about every small detail. This creates pressure and slow responses. But with the right kind of practice, the brain slowly becomes faster and more automatic. Understanding this idea is very important. Freezing is not a sign of failure. It is simply a sign that the brain needs more practice producing language in real time. So if the problem is not intelligence and it is not vocabulary, then what is the real problem? The answer is surprisingly simple. Most learners are missing one important habit. That habit is daily spoken output practice. Many learners spend years studying English silently. They read books quietly. They watch videos quietly. They listen to lessons carefully. All of these activities are helpful, but they only train the brain to understand English. Very few learners spend time speaking English out loud every day. They may practice speaking only in a classroom or during a rare conversation. Because speaking practice happens so rarely, the brain never becomes comfortable with producing sentences quickly. Language grows through use, not only through observation. Imagine learning a sport like swimming. You can watch many videos about swimming. You can read books about swimming techniques. But if you never enter the water, your body will never learn how to swim. English speaking works in the same way. The brain must practice creating sentences again and again. This repetition builds a new habit. Over time, the brain becomes faster at finding words and forming sentences. The good news is that speaking practice does not need to be complicated. You do not need a perfect partner or a classroom every day. You can start with simple sentences about your own life. For example, you can say simple sentences like these. Today, I am practicing English. I am learning new ideas. I want to speak English more confidently. These sentences may look small, but they train the brain to produce language. When you practice speaking daily, your brain slowly changes. Words become easier to find. Sentences become easier to form. The fear of speaking becomes smaller. This simple habit can transform the way you use English. Many learners believe that speaking practice must be long or difficult. They imagine long conversations with native speakers. They think they need perfect grammar before they begin speaking. Because of this belief, they delay speaking practice again and again. In reality, speaking practice can be very simple. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to help the brain become comfortable with producing English sentences. You can begin with small daily speaking exercises. For example, you can describe what you're doing during the day. You can talk about your plans. You can explain something you learned in a lesson. Even simple descriptions train the brain to organize English ideas. Imagine waking up in the morning and saying a few sentences about your day. You might say, "Today I will study English for 30 minutes. I have some work to finish. In the evening, I want to watch an English video." These short sentences are powerful practice. Another useful exercise is explaining something around you. You can describe the room you're sitting in. You can talk about the weather outside. You can explain what you see in a picture. This kind of practice helps your brain create sentences naturally. At first, your speaking will feel slow. You may pause often while searching for words. This is completely normal. Every learner experiences this stage. The important thing is to continue practicing. After some days of practice, something interesting begins to happen. Your brain starts remembering common sentence patterns. Words appear more quickly. You spend less time translating in your mind. This is how fluency slowly develops. It does not appear suddenly. It grows through many small moments of speaking practice every day. Another reason many learners freeze when speaking is the habit of trying to speak perfectly. They want every sentence to be correct. They want perfect grammar. They want perfect pronunciation. Because of this, the brain starts checking every small detail before the sentence is spoken. This habit creates pressure inside the mind. The learner begins thinking too much about rules instead of communication. The brain starts asking many questions. Is this grammar correct? Is this word the best choice? Is my pronunciation right? While the brain is checking all these things, the sentence becomes slow. But real conversations do not work this way. In normal communication, people focus on sharing ideas, not on building perfect sentences. Even native speakers make small mistakes when they speak. What matters most is that the message is clear. For English learners, this is an important shift in thinking. Instead of chasing perfect sentences, the goal should be clear communication. When you allow yourself to speak simple sentences, your brain becomes more relaxed. Imagine a learner trying to say a complex sentence with perfect grammar. The brain will take a long time to build that sentence. But if the learner chooses a simpler sentence, the message can come out faster and more naturally. For example, instead of trying to say a complicated sentence, you can speak in simple steps. You can say, "I am learning English." Then you can add another sentence. "I practice speaking every day." These small sentences communicate the idea clearly. This approach helps remove the fear of speaking. When the pressure of perfection disappears, the brain becomes more active and flexible. Words start coming more easily, and sentences begin to flow more naturally. The important idea is simple. Speaking is a skill that grows through action, not through perfect thinking. When learners focus on communication instead of perfection, their confidence grows quickly. Over time, the brain learns to build sentences faster, and speaking English becomes a more natural experience. Now that we understand the real problem, the next step is building a simple speaking routine. Many learners believe they need long conversations to improve their speaking. In reality, small daily practice is enough to train the brain. The goal is to speak a little every day so the brain becomes comfortable producing English sentences. The first step is very simple. Every day, speak for a few minutes about your daily life. You can talk about what you did yesterday. You can describe what you're doing today. You can also talk about your plans for tomorrow. These small topics help your brain organize ideas into clear English sentences. The second step is repeating useful sentences. Choose a few simple sentences and repeat them slowly and clearly. For example, you might say, "I am improving my English every day." You can also say, "I want to speak English more confidently." Repeating useful sentences helps your brain remember common speaking patterns. The third step is describing your environment. Look around the room and explain what you see. Or you can describe objects, colors, or activities. For example, you might say, "There is a table near the window." You could also say, "My phone is on the desk." This kind of speaking practice trains your brain to form sentences naturally. Another helpful habit is recording your voice. Once a day, record yourself speaking for 1 or 2 minutes. You can talk about anything you like. Later, you can listen to the recording and notice your pronunciation and sentence structure. This simple habit helps you become more aware of your speaking ability. The most important part of this routine is consistency. Speaking for 5 minutes every day is much more powerful than speaking for 1 hour once a week. Small daily practice builds strong habits inside the brain. After several weeks of regular speaking, you will notice something interesting. Your mind will begin to react faster. Words will appear more quickly. Speaking will start to feel easier and more natural. This is how a simple routine slowly builds real speaking confidence. Many English learners believe that fluent speakers have a special talent. They think some people are naturally better at languages. Because of this belief, learners sometimes feel discouraged when speaking feels difficult. However, fluency is usually not the result of talent. In most cases, fluent speakers simply built stronger habits over time. They practiced using the language regularly, even when their sentences were not perfect. Think about how children learn to speak their first language. They do not begin with perfect grammar. They start with simple words and short sentences. They repeat the same patterns many times. Slowly, their speaking becomes clearer and more natural. The same process happens when adults learn English. At the beginning, speaking may feel slow and uncomfortable. The learner may pause often while searching for words. But every small attempt helps the brain become more familiar with producing language. Fluent speakers usually focus on communication rather than perfection. They do not stop speaking every time they make a small mistake. Instead, they continue sharing their ideas and learning from experience. Another important habit of fluent speakers is repetition. They use common sentence patterns again and again. Over time, these patterns become automatic. The brain no longer needs to search for every word. For example, many daily sentences become natural through repetition. A learner may often say, "I think this idea is useful." They might also say, "I am working on improving my English." When these patterns are repeated often, the brain begins to produce them quickly. Fluent speakers also expose themselves to the language regularly. They listen to conversations, read simple materials, and practice speaking whenever possible. This constant interaction helps the brain stay connected with the language. The real secret of fluency is simple. It is not a mysterious skill that only a few people possess. Fluency grows from consistent practice and regular use of the language. When learners understand this truth, their mindset begins to change. Instead of worrying about mistakes, they focus on progress. With steady practice and patience, speaking English gradually becomes smoother and more natural. If you understand English but freeze when speaking, remember that you are not alone. This experience is very common among language learners. Many people reach a stage where their understanding becomes strong, but their speaking still feels slow. The important thing to remember is that this problem has a clear solution. The main idea from today's lesson is simple. Understanding English and speaking English are different skills. Listening and reading help your brain recognize the language. Speaking helps your brain produce the language. To become confident, both skills must grow together. If you want to improve your speaking, begin with small daily practice. Speak about your day. Describe what you see around you. Repeat useful sentences that express your ideas. These simple actions slowly train your brain to create sentences more quickly. At the beginning, your speaking may still feel slow. You may pause while searching for words. Sometimes your sentences may not sound perfect. This is completely normal during the learning process. Instead of worrying about mistakes, focus on communication. The goal of language is to share ideas and connect with people. When you practice speaking regularly, your brain becomes more flexible and confident. Over time, you will notice small improvements. Words will appear faster. Sentences will become smoother. Speaking English will start to feel less stressful and more natural. The most powerful habit is consistency. Even 5 minutes of speaking practice every day can create real progress. Small daily efforts build strong speaking ability over time. So if you want to stop freezing when speaking English, start with one simple step today. Speak a little. Practice regularly. Stay patient with the process. With steady practice, your confidence will grow, and speaking English will become a natural part of your life.